The Valen system had been burning for 3 days straight. From the observation deck of the Oran refugee ship Gentle Dawn, Administrator Torek watched the distant flashes of light that meant death. Each flash was a ship dying. Each burst of color was hundreds of lives ending in fire and vacuum. He had stopped counting the explosions after the first day. There were simply too many. The war between the Kreth Dominion and the Selvari Confederacy had been raging for nearly a decade. 10 years of hatred. 10 years of battles across 100 star systems. And now, finally, both sides had brought their full strength to Valen for what everyone knew would be the final confrontation. The problem was that the Oran people lived in Valen. They had called this system home for over 2,000 years. They were not warriors. They were farmers and artists and builders. They had no warships, no weapons, no way to defend themselves, and now they were trapped between two giants who had decided to settle their differences right on top of them. Torek turned away from the viewport and looked at the faces of his people. The Gentle Dawn was packed far beyond its capacity. Families huddled together in every corner. Children cried for parents they would never see again. The old and the sick lay on makeshift beds, tended by volunteers who had nothing but kindness to offer. There were 47 refugee ships in the convoy. Over 300,000 Oran civilians, all trying to escape the gravity well of their home planet, before the battle consumed everything. But the fighting had spread too fast. The escape routes were blocked. Kreth ships to the north, Selvari ships to the south, and everywhere, the constant exchange of weapons fire that turned empty space into a death trap. "Administrator," said his assistant, a young female named Vess. "We have received responses to our distress calls." Torek felt a small spark of hope. Who answered? Vess looked down at her datapad. Her expression told him everything before she spoke. "The Mendari Commerce Guild says they cannot risk their ships in an active war zone. The Thren Collective expresses sympathy but will not intervene in what they call a bilateral conflict. The Galactic Assembly has issued a statement calling for peace but has taken no action. So no one is coming." "There was one other response," Vess said slowly. "From the Human Coalition." Torek blinked. "The humans? The young species from the Outer Rim?" "Yes, Administrator. They say they are sending help." For a moment, Torek did not know how to respond. The humans were barely known in this part of the galaxy. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Their territory consisted of a single star system. They had no fleet to speak of, no military presence beyond their own borders. No influence in galactic politics. What could they possibly do against the combined might of the Kreth and Selvari? "How many ships are they sending?" Torek asked. Vess checked her datapad again. "One, Administrator. They are sending one ship." Torek closed his eyes. One ship. Against hundreds. It was not help. It was a gesture. A meaningless gesture from a species too young to understand what they were facing. But it was the only response they had received. Far across the galaxy, in the Sol system, Captain Elena Vasquez stood before the Coalition Council and waited for their decision. The council chamber was a simple room. Humans had not yet developed the taste for grand architecture that older species seemed to favor. Plain walls, functional lighting, a circular table where 12 representatives sat with the weight of humanity's future on their shoulders. "You are asking us to intervene in a conflict that does not concern us," said Councillor Chen, the eldest member of the group. "A conflict between two powers that could crush our entire civilization without breaking stride." "I am asking us to save innocent lives," Elena replied. 300,000 civilians are trapped in that system. They have no weapons. They have no way to defend themselves. They are going to die unless someone helps them. "And what can we do?" asked Councillor Okonkwo. "We have one ship capable of reaching Valen in time. One ship, Captain. The Resolve is 30 years old. It was built for exploration, not combat." "The Resolve has been upgraded," Elena said. "She may be old, but she is capable." "Capable of what? Fighting 2 entire fleets?" Elena paused. This was the moment that mattered, the moment when she had to make them understand. Counselors, she said, I have studied the intelligence reports on both the Kreth and the Selvari. I know their weapons, I know their tactics, I know their ships, and I am telling you that the Resolve can do this, not by fighting them directly, not by trying to destroy their fleets, but by doing something they will not expect. And what is that? Asked Chen, standing in their way. The council members exchanged glances. Elena could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear. Humanity had spent its short time among the stars trying to avoid attention. They had kept to themselves, built quietly, prepared for a future they hoped would be peaceful. The idea of inserting themselves into a war between two major powers went against everything they had worked for. But Elena also saw something else in those faces. She saw the same thing that had driven humans to cross oceans in wooden ships. The same thing that had pushed them to walk on the moon with primitive rockets. The same thing that had made them reach for the stars in the first place. They wanted to help. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. If we do nothing, Elena said softly, 300,000 innocent people will die. Children will die. And we will have to live with the knowledge that we could have tried and chose not to. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, Counselor Chen spoke. The resolve is yours, Captain. Bring those people home. Elena saluted. Thank you, Counselor. I will not fail them. 3 hours later, the Resolve launched from Earth orbit and began its journey to Velen. The ship was not impressive by galactic standards. It was roughly cylindrical, about 400 meters long, with a sleek hull designed for speed rather than intimidation. Its weapons were concealed, its true capabilities hidden behind a modest exterior that invited underestimation. Elena stood on the bridge and watched the stars blur as the ship entered slipspace. Around her, a crew of 147 humans prepared for what might be their final mission. Captain, said Lieutenant Commander David Park, her executive officer. I have completed the tactical analysis. The situation is worse than we thought. Show me. The main display lit up with a three-dimensional map of the Valen system. Red markers indicated Kreth ships. Blue markers showed Selvari positions. And in the middle, surrounded on all sides, a cluster of green dots represented the Oran refugee convoy. The Kreth have brought 312 warships, Park said. The Selvari have 289. They have been fighting for 3 days straight, but neither side has gained a significant advantage. The civilian convoy is trapped in the crossfire. Based on current trajectories, the fighting will reach them within the next 18 hours. Elena studied the display. The numbers were overwhelming. Any sane tactical analysis would conclude that intervention was impossible. That one ship could not make a difference against nearly 600 enemy vessels. But Elena had not come this far by accepting what was supposed to be impossible. What do we know about their command structure? She asked. The Kreth fleet is led by Admiral Krethfos. He is known for aggressive tactics and absolute refusal to retreat. The Selvari are commanded by Admiral Selvarinox. She is more cautious, but equally determined to achieve victory. Neither will back down easily. No, Captain. They have too much invested in this battle, too much history, too much hatred. Elena nodded slowly. Then we will have to give them something new to think about. She turned to face her crew. They were young, most of them. The oldest among them had gray in their hair, but even they had grown up in an era when humanity was still learning its place among the stars. None of them had ever faced a real enemy. None of them had ever been tested in actual combat. But they had volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them. When Elena had explained what they were attempting, when she had told them the odds and the dangers, not one person had asked to be removed from the crew roster. They had simply nodded and gotten to work. That was what made humans different, Elena thought. Not their technology, not their weapons, not their ships. It was their stubborn refusal to accept that something could not be done simply because it was hard. We will arrive at Velen in approximately 16 hours, Elena announced. I want everyone to get some rest. When we drop out of slipspace, things are going to move very fast. I need all of you sharp and ready. She paused, looking at each face in turn. I know what we are about to do seems impossible. I know the odds are against us. But I also know that somewhere in that system, 300,000 people are praying for a miracle. They are hoping that someone, anyone, will come to help them. Elena's voice grew firm. We are going to be that someone. We are going to show the galaxy what humans are made of. Not because we want to fight. Not because we want to prove ourselves, but because there are innocent people who need us and we do not abandon those in need. The crew responded with a quiet determination that Elena felt in her own heart. Now get some rest, she said. We have a long journey ahead. As the crew dispersed to their quarters, Elena remained on the bridge. She stood before the viewport and watched the strange lights of slipspace flow past like a river of stars. Somewhere ahead, a battle raged. Somewhere ahead, children huddled in fear while warships tore each other apart around them. Somewhere ahead, the galaxy waited to see if anyone would answer the call for help. Elena Vasquez had made her choice. Humanity had made its choice. One ship, one chance, and the fate of 300,000 souls hanging in the balance. The resolve flew on through the darkness between stars, carrying with it the hopes of a species that had always believed in doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Admiral Krethvos had been fighting wars for longer than most species had been traveling between stars. He stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, and watched the battle unfold around him. His fleet had been trading fire with the Selvari for 3 days. Dozens of ships on both sides had been destroyed. Thousands of warriors had died. And still neither side had gained the upper hand. This was the nature of war between equals. Two powers roughly matched in strength, grinding against each other until one finally broke. Krethvos had no intention of being the one to break. Admiral, said his tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Vreth, we have detected an anomaly. What kind of anomaly? A slipspace rupture, sir. Approximately 200,000 kilometers from the Oran convoy. Krethvos frowned. Neither his fleet nor the Selvari had any ships in that position, and the battle had been raging long enough that any reinforcements would have arrived already. Origin? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. The signature does not match any species in our database. On the main display, a small dot appeared where no dot had been before. A single vessel, emerging from faster-than-light travel into the middle of an active war zone. Scan that ship, Krethvos ordered. I want to know everything about it. The seconds stretched as his sensors reached across space to examine the newcomer. When the data came back, Krethvos felt a moment of confusion. It appears to be human, Admiral. Human? Krethvos searched his memory for information about that species. They were from the far edge of the galaxy, a young civilization, barely a century old in terms of interstellar travel. They had a single home system, a handful of colonies, and no significant military presence. What is one human ship doing here? He asked. We are receiving a transmission, Admiral. Put it through. The main display flickered, and a human female appeared. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that showed no fear. Behind her, Krethvos could see a simple bridge filled with humans working at various stations. Attention all vessels, the human said. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Human Coalition ship Resolve. We have come in response to the Oran distress call. We are here to escort the refugee convoy to safety. Krethvos stared at the screen. Was this some kind of joke? Furthermore, the human continued, we are requesting an immediate ceasefire in this sector to allow civilian evacuation. Any attacks on the Oran convoy will be considered an attack on the Human Coalition. The transmission ended. For a long moment, no one on the command deck spoke. Then Vreth broke the silence. Admiral, is she serious? Krethvos let out a harsh laugh. She must be. The humans are known for many things, but humor is not among them. What should we do? The answer seemed obvious to Krethvos. One ship, from a species that had never fought a major war, was demanding that he halt his battle. It was absurd. It was insulting. It was the kind of arrogance that deserved to be punished. Open a channel to that ship, he ordered. When the connection was established, Krethvos leaned forward in his command chair. Human captain, he said. I am Admiral Krethvos of the Kreth Dominion. Your request for a ceasefire is denied. Your demand that we halt our operations is noted and rejected. You will withdraw from this system immediately, or you will be destroyed. The human captain did not flinch. Admiral, I understand that you have no reason to take us seriously. We are new to this part of the galaxy. We have never fought in your wars. But I am asking you, for the sake of the innocent people in that convoy, to please reconsider. Reconsider? Krethvos felt his anger rising. You come into my battle with one ship and ask me to reconsider? The Orin are not my concern. Their survival is not my problem. And you, human, are nothing but an insect buzzing in my ear. Then I am sorry, Admiral, the human said. But we will not withdraw. If you attack the convoy, you will have to go through us first. The channel closed. Krethvos sat back in his chair and considered his options. He could ignore the human ship entirely. One vessel, no matter how determined, could not stop his fleet. But the audacity of this interference annoyed him. It demanded a response. Vreth, he said. Dispatch the 3rd Destroyer Squadron to eliminate that human vessel. Make it quick. I do not want this distraction continuing. Yes, Admiral. Across the battlefield, on the Selvari flagship Wisdom's Edge, Admiral Selvarinox was watching the same events unfold. Unlike Krethvos, she did not immediately dismiss the human ship. Selvarinox had not survived 40 years of military service by underestimating her enemies. And while the humans were certainly not her enemies, there was something about this situation that troubled her. Lieutenant, she said to her intelligence officer, what do we know about humanity? The young officer pulled up a data file. Very little, Admiral. They are a young species from the Outer Rim. Single system origin. Limited colonial expansion. No significant military engagements on record. Their technology appears to be comparable to our own, perhaps slightly less advanced. Weapons? Unknown. They have never been in a serious conflict, so we have no combat data. Selvarinox nodded slowly. And yet they sent one ship into the middle of a war zone. Either they are incredibly foolish, or they know something we do not. She watched as the Kreth Destroyer Squadron broke formation and began moving toward the human vessel. 6 warships against 1. The outcome should have been obvious. But Selvarinox had learned long ago that the obvious outcome was not always the actual one. All ships, hold position, she ordered. Do not engage the human vessel. I want to see what happens. On the bridge of the Resolve, Lieutenant Commander Park announced the incoming threat. Captain, 6 Kreth destroyers are moving to intercept. They will be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Elena had been expecting this. In fact, she had been counting on it. Helm, maintain course toward the convoy. Do not alter our trajectory. Captain, if we do not take evasive action, I am aware, Ensign. Maintain course. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, but no one questioned the order. They had trained for this moment. They knew what the Resolve was capable of. Now it was time to show the rest of the galaxy. Elena opened a channel to the Orin convoy. Administrator Torek, this is Captain Vasquez. We are inbound to your position. Please have your ships ready to move on my signal. The response came quickly. Captain, you must not do this. The Kreth will destroy you. Please, save yourselves. We did not come all this way to turn back now, Administrator. Just be ready. She closed the channel and turned her attention to the tactical display. The Kreth destroyers were closing fast. They were large ships, each one nearly twice the size of the Resolve. Their weapons were visible along their hulls, plasma cannons and missile tubes bristling with lethal potential. 3 minutes to weapons range, Park reported. Elena took a deep breath. All hands, battle stations. Activate defensive systems. Prepare for incoming fire. The Resolve transformed. Hidden panels slid open along its hull. Weapons that had been concealed were now revealed. Sensor arrays that had been operating at minimum power now blazed to full strength. The modest exploration vessel suddenly looked very different. 2 minutes. On the Kreth destroyers, tactical officers began reporting strange readings. "Commander, the human ship is changing." "What do you mean, changing?" "Its power signature has increased by 400%. We are detecting weapon systems that were not visible before, and its defensive screens are—" The officer trailed off, staring at his display. "Well, what about its defensive screens?" "They are stronger than ours, Commander. Significantly stronger." The destroyer commander frowned. This was not what he had expected, but orders were orders, and Admiral Krethvos did not accept failure. "All ships, open fire." The 6 destroyers unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Dozens of plasma bolts streaked across space toward the Resolve. It was enough firepower to cripple a battleship, enough destruction to overwhelm any normal defensive system. The Resolve did not even slow down. Its point defense systems activated with perfect precision. Every incoming plasma bolt was tracked, targeted, and neutralized before it could make contact. The human ship flew through the storm of fire as if it were nothing more than light rain. "What is happening?" the destroyer commander demanded. "Why is that ship still intact?" No one had an answer. "Fire again. All weapons. Continuous fire." The destroyers poured everything they had at the Resolve. The space between them filled with streaking death, and still the human ship came on unscathed, unstoppable. Then Captain Elena Vasquez gave an order. "Mr. Park, target the lead destroyer. 1 railgun round. Disable their engines." "Aye, Captain." The Resolve had been designed for exploration, but exploration in a dangerous galaxy required certain precautions, and the railgun that now fired from the human ship was one of those precautions. The projectile traveled at a fraction of the speed of light. It crossed the distance between ships in less than a second, and when it struck the lead destroyer, it punched through the rear section with surgical precision. The destroyer shuddered. Its engines died. The ship began to drift, powerless but intact. Emergency lights flickered on as the crew realized they were no longer part of the fight. But they were alive. The human ship had not tried to kill them. It had simply stopped them. The remaining 5 destroyers slowed their advance. Their commanders stared at their displays, trying to understand what had just happened. "All Kreth vessels," Captain Vasquez broadcast, "this is your only warning. We are here to protect the Oran convoy. We do not wish to destroy you. But if you continue your attack, we will defend ourselves and those we came to save. The choice is yours." Across the Valen system, every ship in both fleets heard that transmission. Every commander watched as one human ship disabled a Kreth destroyer with a single shot. Every tactical officer began running calculations, trying to figure out what they were really dealing with. And for the first time in 3 days of constant battle, the guns fell silent. Admiral Krethvos gripped the arms of his command chair so hard that his claws left marks in the metal. He had just watched one of his destroyers get crippled by a ship that should not have been able to scratch its paint. "Get me everything we have on humanity," he growled. "Everything. I want to know what we are facing." On the other side of the battlefield, Admiral Selvari Knox allowed herself a small smile. "Interesting," she murmured. "Very interesting indeed." The human ship continued its journey toward the Oran convoy, and now no one moved to stop it. The silence that fell over the Valen system was unlike anything the soldiers of either fleet had ever experienced. For 3 days, the constant thunder of weapons fire had been their reality. The flash of plasma bolts, the streak of missiles, the distant explosions of dying ships had become as familiar as breathing. Now, suddenly, there was nothing. Both fleets hung motionless in space, watching the single human vessel that had changed everything. On the bridge of the Resolve, Captain Elena Vasquez allowed herself a moment to breathe. The first stage of her plan had worked. The display of capability had given both sides something to think about, but she knew this pause would not last forever. "Status report," she said. Lieutenant Commander Park checked his displays. The Kreth destroyer squadron has withdrawn to a safe distance. They are not pursuing. The rest of both fleets are holding position. No immediate threats detected. And the convoy? We will reach them in approximately 6 minutes, Captain. All 47 ships are still intact. Elena nodded. 6 minutes. A lot could happen in 6 minutes. Keep our defenses at maximum readiness. I want to know the instant anything changes. Across the battlefield, the intelligence officers of both fleets were working desperately to understand what they were facing. On the Kreth flagship, Vreth presented his findings to Admiral Kreth Vos. Admiral, we have compiled all available data on humanity. Tell me. Vreth activated a holographic display. Images appeared. Earth, the human homeworld, their cities, their technology, their history. Humanity achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 90 years ago. Since then, they have established colonies in 12-star systems, though most of these are small outposts. Their population is estimated at 15 billion across all territories. Their military? This is where the data becomes concerning. Vreth pulled up new images. Ships, weapons, training facilities. We always assumed humanity had a minimal military presence. A defensive force, nothing more. But these files suggest otherwise. Krethvos leaned forward. Explain. It appears that humanity has been deliberately concealing their true capabilities. The ship we just faced, the Resolve, is listed in their public records as an exploration vessel. But its weapons and defensive systems far exceed anything an exploration vessel would need. You are saying they lied about their military strength? Not exactly, Admiral. They simply did not share the full truth. We never asked, and they never volunteered the information. Krethvos processed this. For decades, the galactic powers had ignored humanity as a minor species barely worth noticing. They had assumed that the humans were exactly what they appeared to be, a young civilization still learning to walk among the stars. What if that assumption was wrong? There is more, Vreth said. I have been examining their history. Before they reached space, humans spent thousands of years fighting each other. War after war after war. They developed weapons of terrible power. They learned tactics and strategies through centuries of conflict. All species fight among themselves before they mature, Krethvos said dismissively. Yes, Admiral. But most species stop when they reach the stars. They find new challenges, new frontiers. They leave their violent past behind. Vreth paused. Humanity did not stop. They simply got better at it. And then they hid what they had learned. On the Selvari flagship, Admiral Selvarinox was having a similar conversation with her own intelligence officer. The humans are not what we thought, the officer said. This ship, this Resolve, it should not be able to do what we just witnessed. Its defensive capabilities are at least 2 generations ahead of our own technology. Its weapons appear to be equally advanced. How is that possible? Selvarinox asked. Humanity has only been a spacefaring species for less than a century. We do not know, Admiral. Perhaps they are more innovative than we realized. Perhaps they had help from a patron species we are not aware of. Or perhaps... The officer hesitated. Speak freely. Perhaps they simply developed differently than we expected. Our species and the Kreth both spent centuries exploring and colonizing before we invested heavily in military technology. We assumed all species followed a similar path. But humanity came from a world of constant conflict. War is in their blood. It is possible that their first instinct upon reaching space was to prepare for more war, even as they pretended to be peaceful. Selvarinox considered this. It was a disturbing thought. A species that appeared harmless but was actually preparing for conflict on a massive scale. A species that had hidden its true nature while learning everything it could about its potential enemies. What are their intentions now? She asked. Unknown, Admiral. The human captain claims she is here only to protect the Oran civilians. But if that is true, why send a ship with such overwhelming capabilities? Why reveal their hidden strength for the sake of refugees from a neutral species? That was the question that troubled Selvarinox most of all. The humans had nothing to gain from this intervention. The Orin were not allies of humanity. There was no strategic value in saving them. Any rational calculation would have suggested staying home and avoiding involvement in a conflict between two major powers. Yet here they were. One ship, one captain, standing between 600 warships and a convoy of helpless civilians. Either the humans were playing a game too complex for Selvarinox to understand, or they had come here for the simple reason their captain had stated. They had come to help. The Resolve reached the Orin convoy without further incident. Captain Vasquez looked out the viewport at the cluster of refugee ships. They were old vessels, many of them. Cargo haulers and passenger liners pressed into service as evacuation transports. She could see hull damage on several of them, scars from near misses in the ongoing battle. Open a channel to the convoy. Administrator Torek appeared on the display. His face showed a mixture of hope and disbelief. Captain Vasquez, you actually made it. Administrator, are your people ready to move? Yes, but, Captain, I do not understand. How did you do this? How did you stop them? Elena smiled slightly. We just showed them something unexpected. Now we need to get your people out of here before they recover from their surprise. Where can we go? The fighting surrounds us on all sides. We have plotted a course through the gap between the two fleets. It will be tight, but if we move now while both sides are still trying to figure out what happened, we should be able to slip through. Torek looked uncertain. And if they decide to stop us? Then we will deal with that when it happens. Administrator, I will not lie to you. This is going to be dangerous. But staying here is certain death. At least this way you have a chance. The Orin leader was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. We will follow you, Captain. Lead the way. The convoy began to move. 47 ships carrying 300,000 lives formed up behind the Resolve and started toward the narrow gap between the hostile fleets. On both flagships, commanders watched this movement with growing tension. They are trying to escape, Freth reported to Admiral Krethvos. The human ship is leading the convoy toward the outer system. Krethvos studied the tactical display. The path the humans had chosen was clever. It threaded between his fleet and the Selvari, staying just far enough from both to avoid easy targeting. If he wanted to stop them, he would have to move his ships out of formation. Orders, Admiral? Krethvos felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. The Orin were not his enemies. He had no particular desire to harm them, but allowing this human ship to dictate his actions was unacceptable. It made him look weak. It suggested that the mighty Kreth Dominion could be intimidated by a single vessel from a minor species. Move the 5th battle group to intercept, he ordered. If the humans want to leave with those refugees, they will have to fight for it. Admiral Selvarinox watched the Kreth ships begin to reposition. They are going to attack the convoy, her tactical officer said. Yes. Should we take advantage of their movement? If they split their forces, we could strike at their main fleet. It was sound tactical thinking. The Kreth were distracted, out of position. A decisive strike now could end the battle in Selvari favor. But Selvarinox hesitated. Something about this situation felt wrong. The human ship, the convoy, the strange pause in the fighting. There were too many unknown factors. Hold position, she ordered. Continue observing. Admiral? I want to see what happens next. On the Resolve, alarms began to sound. Captain, Kreth battle group moving to intercept. 23 warships, including 2 battlecruisers. Elena had expected this. Krethvos could not allow his authority to be challenged without response. Backing down in front of his own fleet would be unthinkable for someone like him. Time to intercept? 12 minutes at current speeds. 12 minutes. The convoy was slow, burdened by old ships with outdated engines. They could not outrun the Kreth interceptors. They would have to fight. Park, what are our options? Her executive officer studied the tactical display. We could try to disable the lead ships like we did with the destroyer, but 23 targets is a lot, Captain. Even with our weapons, we cannot stop them all before they reach the convoy. What about the convoy's own defenses? Minimal. A few civilian ships have point defense systems, but nothing that could stand up to military-grade weapons. Elena considered the situation. She had hoped the demonstration against the destroyers would be enough to deter further aggression. Clearly, she had underestimated Krethvos's pride. "We need another approach," she said. "Something that changes the calculation without starting a full-scale battle." She looked at the display, at the positioning of the fleets, at the narrow corridor the convoy was trying to navigate, and slowly, an idea began to form. "Park, how long would it take us to reach the disabled Kreth destroyer?" "The one we shot earlier? About 4 minutes, Captain." "Change course. We are going to pick up survivors." Park stared at her. "Captain?" "The Kreth crew on that destroyer. Their ship is dead in space. They cannot maneuver, cannot run. If we leave them, they will eventually die when their life support fails." Elena smiled grimly. "We are going to rescue them, but they are our enemies." "They are people, Commander. And we do not leave people to die if we can save them." Elena turned to face her crew. "This is who we are. This is what makes us different. We came here to save lives, and that means all lives. Even the ones who were shooting at us 5 minutes ago." The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Park nodded slowly. "Aye, Captain. Changing course." The Resolve turned away from the convoy and headed toward the drifting Kreth destroyer. Across the system, every tactical officer watched in confusion as the human ship changed direction. "What are they doing?" Admiral Krethvos demanded. Breth checked his sensors. "They are heading toward our disabled destroyer, Admiral, the one they shot earlier." "Why? Are they going to finish it off?" "I do not think so, Admiral. They appear to be launching rescue shuttles." Krethvos froze. "Rescue shuttles?" "Yes, Admiral. They are rescuing our crew." For the first time in the battle, Admiral Krethvos did not know what to say. His enemy had just stopped in the middle of an escape attempt to save his own people. It made no tactical sense. It served no strategic purpose. It was, by every measure of military logic, completely insane. And yet the human shuttles were already docking with the crippled destroyer, pulling Kreth warriors from the wreckage. "Admiral," Vreth said quietly, "what do you want us to do?" Krethvos did not answer immediately. He was too busy trying to understand the species he was facing. What kind of people stopped to save their enemies? The rescue operation took 17 minutes. 17 minutes during which the entire Valen system held its breath. 2 massive fleets, hundreds of warships, thousands of weapon systems all pointed at each other. And in the middle of it all, human shuttles moved back and forth between the Resolve and the crippled Kreth destroyer, pulling survivors from the wreckage. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the operation from the bridge of her ship. Each shuttle that returned brought more Kreth warriors, dazed and confused but alive. Her medical teams were working around the clock to treat their injuries. Her crew was giving up their own bunks to make room for the unexpected guests. It was, by any military standard, complete madness. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Park reported, "we have recovered 214 Kreth personnel. That is the entire surviving crew of the destroyer." "Any casualties during the rescue?" "No, Captain. A few of the Kreth warriors tried to resist at first, but when they realized we were actually helping them, they cooperated." Elena nodded. "Good. Set course back to the convoy. We have stayed here long enough." As the Resolve began to move again, Admiral Krethvos faced the most difficult decision of his military career. The 5th Battle Group was still moving to intercept the convoy. His orders stood, but everything had changed in the last 17 minutes. The human ship had stopped its escape to rescue his people. 214 Kreth warriors were alive right now because the enemy had chosen mercy over advantage. "Admiral," Vreth said carefully, "the battle group is requesting confirmation of their orders." Krethvos said nothing. "Admiral?" "I heard you." Krethvos stood from his command chair and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, his warriors were aboard an enemy vessel, being treated with kindness by the very species he had ordered destroyed. What did that mean? What did it say about humanity? What did it say about him? "Open a channel to the human ship," he ordered. The connection was established quickly. Captain Vasquez appeared on the display looking tired but composed. "Admiral Krethvos," she said, "I have 214 of your people aboard my ship. They are receiving medical treatment and will be returned to you as soon as the situation allows." Krethvos studied her face. He had fought dozens of species over his long career. He had learned to read his enemies, to understand their motivations and weaknesses. But this human woman was unlike anyone he had ever faced. "Why did you rescue them?" he asked. "Because they needed help." "That is not an answer. They are your enemies. They were trying to kill you." Vasquez shook her head. "They were following orders, just like your battle group is following orders right now. That does not make them my enemies. It makes them soldiers doing their duty." She paused. "I do not fight soldiers, Admiral. I fight wars, and I would rather end a war than win one." Krethvos felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in decades of constant conflict. Doubt. "Your convoy is trying to escape," he said slowly. "My battle group is moving to stop them. I know. If I order them to attack, many people will die. Your people, the Orin, perhaps even my own warriors aboard your ship." "That is true. But you still stopped to save my crew, even knowing what I might do." Vasquez met his eyes through the display. "Admiral, I made a choice when I came to this system. I chose to believe that protecting innocent lives was worth any risk. That choice does not change based on what you might or might not do. It is simply who I am." The connection was silent for a long moment. Then Krethvos spoke words he had never imagined himself saying. "Recall the 5th battle group. Let the convoy pass." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, every officer turned to stare at their admiral. "Sir?" Vreth's voice was barely a whisper. "You heard me. Recall the battle group. The convoy is to be allowed safe passage out of the system." "Admiral, the Council will not understand. They will question your judgment. They may even—" "I am well aware of the consequences." Krethvos turned to face his crew. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "I have fought for the Dominion my entire life. I have won victories that will be remembered for generations. But today, I learned something I did not expect." He looked back at the display where the human ship was already moving to rejoin the convoy. "I learned that strength is not always measured by how many enemies you can destroy. Sometimes it is measured by who you choose to save." He straightened his shoulders. "Recall the battle group. That is my final order on this matter." Across the battlefield, Admiral Selvarinox watched the Kreth ships pull back with undisguised amazement. "Admiral, the Kreth are standing down. The convoy is being allowed to pass." Selvarinox nodded slowly. She had seen many surprising things in her career, but this might have been the most surprising of all. Krethvos, the most aggressive and uncompromising commander in the Dominion fleet, had just shown mercy because of one human ship. Open a channel to the resolve. Open a channel to the resolve. The journey to Safe Harbor took 8 days. 8 days of slow travel through empty space, with 47 refugee ships, following the resolve like children following a protective parent. 8 days during which the news of what had happened in the Valence system spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Captain Elena Vasquez spent most of those 8 days dealing with messages, communications from Earth, asking for detailed reports, messages from the Galactic Assembly, requesting clarification of humanity's role in the ceasefire, and most surprisingly, a growing flood of transmissions from species she had never heard of, all asking the same question. Who are you, and where did you come from? On the 5th day, Administrator Torek came aboard the Resolve for a visit. Elena met him in the ship's small observation lounge, a room with wide viewports that looked out on the stars. The Orin leader moved slowly, his age showing in every step, but his eyes were sharp and curious. "Captain Vasquez," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "I wanted to thank you personally. 300,000 of my people are alive because of what you did." "It was the right thing to do, Administrator. No thanks are necessary." Torek smiled softly. "That is what makes your actions so remarkable. You say it as if it were simple, as if any species would have done the same." "Would they not have?" The old Orin shook his head. "No, Captain. I sent distress calls to every power I could reach. The Mindari refused because of the risk. The Thren refused because of politics. The Assembly refused because they did not want to upset the balance of power. Only humanity answered." Elena was quiet for a moment. Through the viewport she could see the refugee ships, their running lights blinking steadily in the darkness. "Can I tell you something, Administrator?" "Of course." "When the Coalition Council was debating whether to send help, there were people who said we should not get involved. They argued that we were too small, too weak, too new to the galactic stage. They said that inserting ourselves into someone else's war would only bring us trouble." "What changed their minds?" Elena smiled. "I showed them pictures. Images from your distress call. Children huddled in cargo holds. Families separated by the fighting. Old people who had spent their whole lives building something, watching it all burn around them." She turned to face Torek directly. "Humans are not naturally brave, Administrator. We are not inherently noble. We have done terrible things to each other throughout our history. But we also have a quality that sometimes surprises even ourselves. When we see someone suffering, when we see injustice happening right in front of us, something inside us refuses to look away." Torek considered this. "And that is why you came? Because you could not look away?" "Yes, because my people, for all our faults, have learned one truth through centuries of war and pain. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." Elena's voice grew firm. "We chose to do something." The convoy reached the Mindari Commerce Guild's neutral space on the 8th day. The Mindari were traders and merchants, more interested in profit than politics. They had refused to help during the crisis, but now that the fighting was over, they were happy to provide sanctuary for the Orin refugees in exchange for reasonable compensation. Elena watched from the bridge as the refugee ships began docking with the Mindari orbital stations. Families reunited. Children ran through corridors that were not shaking from weapons fire. The old and sick were transferred to proper medical facilities. It was not a perfect solution. The Orin had lost their home, their possessions, their way of life. But they were alive. They had a chance to rebuild. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Park said, "we are receiving a priority message from the Galactic Assembly." "Put it through." The main display lit up with the image of an Assembly representative, a tall being with iridescent scales and multiple eyes. Elena recognized the species as the Karath, one of the founding members of the galactic government. "Captain Vasquez," the representative said formally, "I am Ambassador Karethsol of the Galactic Assembly. I have been authorized to extend an invitation to humanity." "What kind of invitation, Ambassador?" "The Assembly has been following the events in the Valen system with great interest. The ceasefire you helped broker between the Kreth Dominion and the Selvari Confederacy is holding. Both sides have agreed to begin formal peace negotiations." Elena felt a surge of hope. "That is wonderful news." "It is unprecedented news, Captain. A war that has lasted 10 years, ended by the intervention of a single ship from a species we barely knew existed." The ambassador's multiple eyes focused on her with unsettling intensity. "The Assembly would like to understand how this happened. More importantly, we would like to invite humanity to participate in the peace negotiations as a neutral mediator." Elena was momentarily stunned. "Ambassador, humanity has no experience in galactic diplomacy. We are not qualified to mediate between two major powers." "On the contrary, Captain, you are uniquely qualified. Both sides trust you." Both sides respect what you did, and neither side sees you as a threat to their interests. The ambassador paused. You have accomplished something that no other species could have achieved. The Assembly believes you should be present when the final peace is negotiated. Elena thought about this for a long moment. It was a tremendous opportunity, but also a tremendous responsibility. Humanity stepping onto the galactic stage as mediators and peacemakers. It was not the role anyone had expected them to play, but maybe it was the role they were meant for. I will need to consult with my government, she said finally. But I believe they will accept your invitation. Excellent. We will await your formal response. The communication ended. Elena sat in the silence of the bridge, processing what had just happened. One ship, one mission, and now humanity was being invited to help shape the future of the galaxy. It was more than she had ever imagined possible. 2 months later, the Treaty of Velan was signed. The ceremony took place on a neutral station, with representatives from the Kreth Dominion, the Selvari Confederacy, the Oran people, the Galactic Assembly, and the Human Coalition all present. Elena Vasquez stood at the center of the proceedings, not as a combatant, but as a witness to the peace she had helped create. Admiral Krethfos was there, looking uncomfortable in formal diplomatic attire instead of his military uniform. He approached Elena before the signing ceremony began. Captain Vasquez, Admiral. The old warrior studied her for a moment. I have thought a great deal about what happened in Velan, about what you did, about what I almost did in response. And what conclusion have you reached? Krethfos let out a breath that might have been a sigh. I was taught that victory was everything, that strength was measured in enemies destroyed and territory conquered. I believed that for my entire life. He looked down at his clawed hands, the same hands that had ordered the deaths of thousands. But you showed me something different. You showed me that true strength lies in knowing when not to fight, in choosing to save lives instead of taking them, in turning an enemy into something else. Into what, Admiral? Krethfos met her eyes. I do not know yet, but perhaps with time we will find out. He turned and walked toward his place at the negotiating table. Admiral Selvari Nox approached next. Unlike Krethfos, she seemed at ease in the diplomatic environment. Captain Vasquez, it appears your species has made quite an impression on the galaxy. We did not intend to make an impression, Admiral. We just wanted to help. Selvari Nox smiled. That is precisely why you have made such an impression. In a galaxy full of species pursuing their own interests, humanity appears to be genuinely concerned with the welfare of others. Is that so unusual? It is practically unique. The Admiral's expression became thoughtful. Tell me, Captain, now that you have the galaxy's attention, what do you intend to do with it? Elena considered the question carefully before answering. The same thing we have always done, Admiral. We will help where we can. We will protect those who need protection, and we will try to make the galaxy a little bit better than we found it. A noble goal. Perhaps, but it is the only goal worth having. The treaty was signed an hour later. 10 years of war ended with strokes of light on a digital document. The Kreth and Selvari would return to their territories. The Oran would be given resources to rebuild their civilization, and humanity would remain as observers, ensuring that the peace held. After the ceremony, Elena returned to the Resolve one last time. The ship was being recalled to Earth for a hero's welcome. A new vessel would take over the patrol duties in this sector, something larger and more capable. The Resolve had earned its retirement. Elena walked through the corridor slowly, remembering everything that had happened. The desperate journey to Velan. The terrifying moment when 6 destroyers opened fire. The rescue of the Kreth crew. The negotiations that followed. Thank you for watching.